Chainsaw Man chapter 126 has just revealed Denji's new power against the worst cook ever, the Falling Devil.
That is disgusting.
Because she just went from serving the food to getting eaten out. What I mean to say is that we let her cook a little bit too much, and the main course for this fine evening is none other than Denji's potential girlfriend, Asa Mitaka?
What?
So of course Denji has to finish off this devil before Asa gets cooked while she's hanging on for dear life. Get it? Because she's literally hanging on?
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Due to the Falling Devil's attack, she sunk into the most traumatic memory from her past. Her cat getting killed by an orphanage worker and having no family. However, Yoru intervened by creating a nail knife and making Asa focus on the pain rather than being sucked into the trap. She's so scared and distrusting of Yoru that she plunges into the traumatic realm again. I mean, can you really blame her? Yoru literally said, "Spill the beans to anyone about me and you're dead." But now you want her to trust you?
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Thus we learn Asa's deepest fear, being scared of both loneliness and companionship. Even though she has unsettling trust issues, she still feels lonely and tries to approach someone, all for it to go haywire because of her clumsiness and idiocy. Thus she can't hand over her body to Yoru either, even though she's the one who knows Asa the best at this point. But of course, she's not the only one who's plagued by her trauma. Our boy Denji is also suffering in the worst way possible, and chapter 126 just made it very clear. In fact, the Falling Devil's attack has uncovered a bunch of parallels between Asa and Denji, like they're both parent-killing losers. From the beginning itself, both Asa and Denji are characters who were alone in the world, isolated from other humans. They both had a deep sense of desperation within them, but were unable to change it on their own. For Denji, it was enough money to survive and necessities like food. Moreover, he also wanted companionship, just like Asa. They both crave acknowledgement and appreciation from society, and it is evident from their actions. Denji wants the world to know he is actually the real Chainsaw Man, and Asa, well, she just wants to not trip over and fall at the most crucial moments as she blames herself for her terrible life. This resulted in both being haunted by the regrets of killing people who loved them the most. While Asa got her mother killed, who cherished her dearly, Denji is bearing the burden of the deaths of both Power and Aki. Furthermore, the woman from the orphanage was jealous of Asa having a family, which is why she took it away. Makima too found it absurd that Pachita chose Denji as his family instead of her, since the Control Devil had never been able to create her own family or equal relationships. Both Denji and Asa have extremely low self-esteem, but their coping mechanisms are totally different. Denji chose ignorance, trying to bury his trauma because he struggled to understand the way he felt for the longest time. He just doesn't have the emotional capacity to process his life events because of his stunted upbringing. Whereas on the other hand, Asa, having led a fairly normal childhood with her own loving mother, knows exactly what her problems are and is constantly hurting over them. This leads to both of them feeling unworthy of living, especially after Makima reveals Denji's memory of killing his father. And since ignorance is bliss, Denji's willful ignorance protected him for a while, but Asa can't enjoy that same privilege. She's cursed with self-awareness and always deep in thought, talking about herself in a bad light, even stating that she'd be better off dead. So, if you put two people wanting to die in the same room, what do you get? Love, baby! That's right, Denji, the biggest simp, and Asa, the biggest femcel in the history of manga. Let's be honest, every Denji ship up until now has crashed and burned miserably. And this one is no different, because what is Asa's immediate goal? To kill the Chainsaw Man so that Yoru leaves her body for good. So both Yoru and Asa attempt to win over Denji's heart so that they can turn him into a weapon and kill Chainsaw Man once and for all. Just like chapter 110's failed attempt where she tries to chop off his head, or for Yoshida to save him with his octopus arm. But despite being deemed as someone between a cat and a criminal, Asa doesn't really want to kill Denji. But Yoru forces her to win over his heart by going on a date with him instead, as the War Devil has a feud with Pochita wanting the nuclear weapons back so that her original true power can return with him. However, this is juxtaposed with Asa's desire for Denji, as she once said that she never had so much fun ever in her life by hanging out with him, and vice versa, Denji said she reminds him of power. So, do you hear that? That's the sound of the ship being sailed, because with both of them being with each other, they could cure both of their loneliness. But the main problem is this. Just like any dramatic rom-com, they both face obstacles in their path by the significant people in their lives. Yoru's conditions put a dent in her chance of ever getting closer to Denji, whereas for him, well, since we know Denji's love life is the biggest red flag for his existence itself, it's all gone thanks to Nayuta. But the biggest surprise here is that the primal fear, the falling devil, wasn't after the hero of hell. Instead, her target is Asa. Huh? Why Yoru and not Chainsaw Man, you ask? I mean, the devils are hell-bent on killing him, right? Get it? Hell-bent? Oh, fine, I'll stop. It's possible that they need Yoru's abilities to turn a being into a powerful weapon strong enough to kill Chainsaw Man. After all, the Falling Devil was foreshadowed to appear in the end of the world by the prophecies of Nostradamus, which was narrated by Yoshida. The Falling Devil has a contract on behalf of the residents of Hell by sending targets through a door. You know, the same kind of ones that we saw with the introduction of the Darkness Devil. And so in order to prepare the final meal out of Asa, the Falling Devil went out of its way to find some apples to go along with the meal, and she makes it very clear how important the apples are. So, here's some food for thought. Falling in the Falling Devil's name in Japanese is spelt as raka, which means falling fruit. Fujimoto has admitted to liking the movie The Menu, which inspired the Falling Devil being a chef searching for the perfect fallen ingredients, thus associating the Falling Devil with fruit. As for the apples, there's another Easter egg that Fujimoto takes from one of his favourite pieces of media. What if I told you that the Falling Devil is a reference to Death Note's Ryuk?
No way!
Ryuk is a god of death, and in Chainsaw Man, fear of death is another fear that people fall into. Like the Shinigami, it is impossible to kill the Falling Devil with conventional means. They both are also notorious for destroying the minds of people they come into contact with. But the holy grail of the evidence comes from apples. Fujimoto incorporates Ryuk's weird obsession with apples into Denji and Power, where they argue on who gets the largest share of Aki's apples in front of him. Denji, being the nice guy that he always is, spares one apple for Aki. Fujimoto also subverted the imagery in the second opening of Death Note, where Ryuk chases after a single apple. But sorry, I got a little bit carried away there with balls deep analysis. If you enjoyed that little Easter egg though, leave a like. As the Falling Devil comes out of the store, some devil hunters sight her and open fire, totally destroying her to bits, all for nothing. She reassembles herself, declaring that it's impossible to kill her with any weapon humanity possesses currently, highlighting how the nukes that Pochita had eaten will one day be released for Yoru. Now, ironically, the Falling Devil doesn't want any meaningless slaughter, all to kill a dozen more people. But it's finally time for the grand entry of our hero, our boy Denji, and he straight up slices apart the Falling Devil for the heinous crime of stealing apples. Well, this attack actually ends up surprising the Falling Devil in a good way too, as she gets the novel experience of being on the menu for the first time herself. This shows how much more powerful Denji has gotten, making a primal fear devil admit that this is the first time they've experienced any ounce of feeling defeat. But then Denji got plunged into reliving a moment he really did not want to.
It's enough to make a grown man cry.
Sensing that Denji is deep into his memory, the Falling Devil proceeds with her plan, but she doesn't know what a whack job Denji is. Honestly, Denji is so dumb that he's actually kind of smart, because he immediately comes out of his trance by cutting up his own brain.
Patrick, your genius is showing.
That's right, according to Denji, whenever he fights fights against devils with mental attacks, he cuts up his brain as a rule. Well, so much for Denji claiming to Asa in chapter 104 that Chainsaw Man uses his brain, all for Fujimoto to put subversion into action by making him not use his brain at all. What? Although maybe you could argue he used his brain to not use his brain.
That also makes sense!
All of this reminds me of how insane Denji became while he was fighting against the zombies in the first chapter. That insanity level is directly proportional to the number of brain cells he loses. And in this chapter, pretty clear he loses almost all of them.
He's got a point.
Even in his human form, he's able to inflict that much damage onto the falling devil by being the first one to cook the chef. So imagine his strength in his full-fledged devil form. My boy's about to cook a whole ass full course meal.
Delicious.
Now, even though it's pretty fun to see Denji's crazy strategy, it is quite sad when you realise where it all stems from. He's unable to come to terms with the loss of Aki and Power to the point that even their image is enough to cause him to hyperventilate. Evidently, he is still horrified at the thought that it even happened in the first place. His reaction is one that displays extreme levels of PTSD and a tendency to self-harm, which is similar to Asa once again. All of this goes back to how Makima told Denji that children have survival instincts to bury their memories, and we know that Denji is no better than a child when it comes to emotional maturity and intelligence. But Denji's brainless strategy works anyhow, and he sees the falling devil as French corn dogs and starts devouring her, and she's enjoying it, calling it a 5-star experience.
I don't know. I think that's a bit dodgy, mate.
Now, even with Denji trying to suppress the trauma of Aki and Power's demise through self-damage, it doesn't stop their influence seeping through. Despite having half a brain, and that's at the best of times, he calls corn dogs French dogs, which is what they are called in Aki's hometown, showing how deeply Denji's been impacted. But tired of Denji's BS making her look ugly, the falling devil fights back and obliterates him, allowing her to continue the search for Asa. But what goes around comes around, as saving that cat really built up karma for our boy, because some kind of Samaritan ends up resurrecting him with their blood, saying, "I still need you to fight, Chainsaw Man." Who even is this benefactor? Is it Yoshida? Maybe Fake Saw Man? Well, thanks to my contract with the anime bullshit devil, I found some hints to the answer. Firstly, this mysterious person helping Denji speaks informal Japanese, referring to Denji as Keigo, but Yoshida has never called Denji in that manner. So unless Yoshida just respects the real Chainsaw Man more than Denji, Haruka and Brobany from chapter 114 have done so, which makes them much more likely. Secondly, judging from the uniform, the person is probably from the same school, solidifying that it may be them. However, Haruka was never shown to wear white sneakers until now, so he's out of the question as well. Lastly, just like our overpowered broken devil hunter Kobani herself, who jumped into fighting someone as strong as the Katana Man, it can actually be Brobany following in her footsteps, especially since Kobani is said to have a bunch of siblings. There's a high chance that Brobany actually established a contract with Chainsaw Man 2. Until we know that it wasn't something insane, that was the good news. But the bad news is for Asa, because the little game of hide and seek she had is over.
Gotcha.
Asa's condition in the previous chapter gives zero hope that she'll be able to fight off the falling devil's direct attacks, especially since Denji was flicked away so easily as well. It seems that the falling devil's been holding back all this time, so until Denji comes to the scene, Asa has to survive on her own. But with how OP the falling devil is, Denji and Asa are going to end up in hell together, where she's going to take back her Chainsaw Man slander from chapter 104. The rest of part 2 will involve them finding the new blood devil and getting back home, because if you remember, Power, the blood fiend, saved Denji by lending blood to him in exchange for Denji coming and finding her when she reincarnates again. Now, while we all wait for that, you can continue watching Peak Fiction here by knowing everything about the war devil Yoru and Asa.